Hello, I'm Matt Hernandez, and this is Book Chat with You. I think at the beginning of every month, I could do a recap of the previous month's episodes. And so, since I missed June, I can cover the episodes I did in June and July. Now, and I also realized that at least for now, this could also be a time at the end of this podcast to kind of, give some updates on what I've thought or some updates to the podcast and the format and all that. So, I have here in that I did A Small Good Thing by Raymond Carver. I like this story. One thing I liked about it is that I read that doctors are recommended to read this story. I don't know what kind of medical classes doctors might take that involves reading literature, but it is an essential thing that I would try to do here. I mean, there was such a pattern in that where the doctors are just trying to console the husband and wife whose names I forget right now after their son had been hit by a car. But then in the end, it was the baker who just kept sort of pranking them and annoying them. In modern terms, I suppose we'd say trolling them, who was actually the helpful one. And I like these stories about something plain and potentially real. I want to use the word mundane, but hopefully that is not mundane for anybody. But just these, how do you say it, pedestrian stories? The next one, Dolls, Dolls, Dolls by Carol Shields, was a little bit of an odd one, right? Because in that one, it has a bit of a disjointed narrative. And Carol Shields, she'll write in a way that reflects the same style as, like, a Raymond Carver, for instance, and some people of that era. But then, out of nowhere, she really plays with style, and the story just bounces around. And sometimes it's a bit of like a character study, a bit more than it is a story. Okay, here, Sensational Spider-Man 38 and 39 that I covered each on their own separate episode. I actually really, really like these two comics. Now, with these comics, I wasn't expecting much because, they're comics and I've been out of that medium for a while. I haven't looked at any comics for a long time. But to see the loss of what Eddie Brock was going through and his desperation and the fact that, I'm not really sure there was any fighting in those two issues. It was just one man losing his mind, and Peter, who's also kind of on the brink, not there yet, he rushes back and he sees what Eddie Brock's about to do to himself, and he goes to stop it. Okay, the next one, Space Station Race. What's the guy's name? Michael J. Dudley, I believe. Daly. Michael J. Daly. I like this short story, or rather children's novel. It was just a very short, fun story. And I do think that, though it's for children, he did try to look up some of the science stuff and try to keep it accurate. I like the voices on it. And I liked how the little boy, many people didn't think much of him, and he still found a way to be useful, in a sense. Okay, the next one, Island of the Blue Dolphins. Some of these stories, they really can transcend what is a children's story or not. Because I guess on this one, by Scott Odell, it originally was not supposed to be a children's story, but somebody told them to kind of change it up a little bit and make it a children's story. I mean, there's so much death at the beginning of the story, and then we're told that it's a children's story. So I think that some of these things really can be, quite universal for all of us to enjoy. I mean, last night I was watching the movie Toy Story 3, and some of those sequences at the end, man, they'll really tear somebody up. Okay, the next one, Matilda by Roald Dahl. Now, a funny thing about this one is I actually prefer the movie a little bit to the book. It is one of my favorite movies, and at moments it can nearly make me cry as well. I mean, we've all seen it. What more can really be said about it? I think that's what I said in the review as well. It's just some differences. In the book, it takes place in Britain, and then the dad talks trash about Americans at least once whenever they're going to watch some kind of soap opera, as if the shows that he's watching aren't just as trash as what he's claiming those things are, like that kind of thing. Okay, the next one, Niagara Falls or does it? Now, this one was actually a reason to make me timid, and maybe I do have some anxiety to deal with in myself because I could feel anxious about a few things. But it was one thing to make me remove the videos from my feed or whatever for a while because in it, it's a children's story. And this book was lying at work because the author, let me make sure I get his name, was at work, or here, the author, Henry Winkler and Lynn Oliver. And the book, and one of these, or this book was at work because he's mentioned quite a bit, or he has a whole chapter in one of the textbooks. But what I really like about it is that it has a message for all of us that we can seek help for a thing if we truly, truly need it. And I think that's important. Okay, the next one, The Happy Short Life of Francis Macomber by Ernest Hemingway. As much as I like the story here, I hate to say it, but some of these long, long sentences by Ernest Hemingway don't always do him a lot of favors. I mean, we're told to think about his clear, concise prose and his iceberg method of writing, but at times, this stuff that's in between the surface, I mean, yeah, it's in between the surface and the fact that no one's stating it whenever they're sitting down, when it's Robert Francis Macomber and Francis Macomber's wife, Margot, and they are sitting around eating breakfast. And yeah, they're not stating what's bothering them, but they end up making it frankly obvious. I guess some people might miss it a little bit, but I mean, later in the story, when tragedy hits Francis, I think a bit of that could have been written a little bit better and stuff. And that's sometimes I think a problem with short stories. How do you write part of action with some things? So the next one, The Sheriff's Children by Charles W. Chestnut. This is one that sometimes haunts me later on to talk about because it's like, am I having the right words, the right sensitivity? Not that I want to play some game about being all politically correct in one's own speech, but I mean, when the story might invite one to use words that are antiquated and all that, well, I believe it uses the word mulatto several times. It's like, can I use these words? Can I say this in this way? And I don't know, but the story was written after the American Civil War, and the author had viewed various forms of discrimination, and, he was compelled to write this kind of story. So something about this story could have been very plausible. Okay, the next one, Pigeons at Daybreak by Anita Desai. So this one, very short story. I haven't seen so many stories that compact so much into such a small amount of space. It's like you really, really have to read so much, so many times to get everything out of it. And yeah, she packs so much in there, and yet at the same time, nothing happens. At the same time, the whole story just takes place in about a 20-hour period. And it's just a Mr. and Mrs. Basso, I believe that was their names, Basu, and the elder, the man, seems to be terminally ill. If he's not terminally ill, he is quite disabled, and he relies on his wife, and you could see her trying to help him, but you could see a little bit of their bickering too. Okay, now I have Amazing Spider-Man 2 to 5. Now I should save these comments towards the end, but I think I would have to stop doing comics because I think me trying to do comics has been an abject failure. I think that this podcast was starting to grow a little bit, but then covering these issues might have really tanked whatever was going on with my podcast. I end up liking this Back in Black series from the issues I have. I only have 7 issues, and I think that there were probably like 12 or something, but I think I have the main ones of the main story from when Aunt May got shot to Peter Parker investigating who did it, him fighting Kingpin, him moving his aunt to another hospital, and things just seeming all around bleak around that. So I do think that I have the main issues of all of that. Okay, so I did end up liking it, but I think in ways things could have been made to be a bit more compact. And if things were a bit more compact with the investigating or the fighting, they could have had a bit more plot of the police trying to investigate who he is and what's Peter Parker doing there and some of that stuff. Okay, the next one, The Husband Stitch by Carmen Maria Machado. You know, I am doing some of these reviews sometimes on a class that I'm taking online, and my professor, she gave me an A minus a bit on what I had written about this because she said that I kept doing such a close reading of it, as I'd even written in a note, that it was beginning to become something of a deconstructionalist type of a thing, and that I missed part of the concept with the feminism in it. But I cannot ignore what's kind of written there in plain text. And as I do a close reading, I think that my guesses about things or interpretations are reasonable. So it is interesting that the author's way of trying to be feminist is in a way to remove male or female stereotypes so they don't even exist. And so part of this idea about being feminist removes a lot of that. It is quite strange. Okay, this next one. You Are What You Love. Okay, Professor James K.A. Smith from Calvin College, he wrote this book, You Are What You Love. It is one of many types of books, whether in philosophy, in literature, in theology, in various subjects, psychology, that might say, what do we actually worship? And this is one of those books. I cannot say maybe this is the best book in that kind of area of thought, but it is a very approachable book. Now, I'm not covering books of this length very much lately, and in fact, I did this video or I did that podcast years ago, and again, I did that one years ago. So it was very approachable, but for various reasons, I moved on to short stories, and I think that short stories could be a better avenue for now. Now, I do hope that you guys would listen to that because there's a lot that we can learn from that concept. What do we actually worship? It is an important concept. And so, with that said, that's what I covered in the past 2 months. I could really see an error with my own podcast and what I have done here because it's become a bit disjointed. So I think I'm going to delete the episodes that are like little announcements type of a thing. And I have one more issue of One More Day that I've made. I think I'll publish that, but then I'll probably just remove it in like a couple of months or something like that, a month or two. And I think that comic books would have to become its own podcast. I really think that I'm kind of tanking myself here by covering some of these podcasts. I really think that short stories are probably the way to go, but I kind of hoped if some people listened to my prior comic book related podcasts, then maybe it was a good avenue to go to try to grow this a little bit and at least get a little bit more feedback and attention, but it seems to have done the opposite thing. Now, every now and then I might cover something like The Sheriff's Children by Charles W. Chestnut. And when I cover some of these things, and I don't have the right cultural sensitivity, whether or not that concept is good or bad or whatever, that is yet another debate. But to whatever is reasonable, regardless of somebody's view to talk about something, I mean, I'm always trying to talk about it in a way that we could have a lively conversation together. So when I talk about some of these things, and it's that one, or it's, what was another one? Oh, An Act of Vengeance by Isabel Allende. And there are a few of these, I guess maybe even The Husband Stitch. I do these things with enough sensitivity, enough reasonable sensitivity. But if my words sometimes don't come out properly inside of some of that, I do apologize. So, with that said, I think I've said enough. Just to say one more time, I think that I would discontinue doing comics. So, there's always a chance that somebody listens to this in the future and you're like, I don't see any comics here at all. Well, yeah, I think I would have removed them. And I think I'd move it to its own podcast. And then along with that, I'll probably end up deleting a lot of the little kind of notes episodes because maybe those kind of distract from the rest of this. And I think I will continue with the recaps before the 5th of every month, covering the previous month. Well, with that said, thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Bye.